Court finds Senator Ike Ekweremadu and wife, plus a medical personnel guilty of organ trafficking charges.
Federal government upscales measures to mop up illicit arms.
It is therefore imperative that we work together to curb the proliferation of small arms in the Lake Chad Basin region if we must put an end to the senseless and mindless violence.
Naira redesign, House of Representatives seek improved internet banking.
Ineffectiveness or difficulty in using internet banking services in Nigeria has brought untold hardship, suffering and difficulties on Nigerians.
And Good Morning Nigeria today focuses on prosecuting offenses at elections.
All right, so the Electoral Act 2022 signed into law on the 25th of February 2022 repealed the 2010 Act, and of course with the objective of improving the electoral system. And the new provisions and consolidated regulations provided the guidelines for the conduct of elections in Nigeria.
The Electoral Act also spells out penalties for violations of provisions, which could attract a fine, imprisonment, or both, depending on the nature and seriousness of the offense and, of course, the degree of the intent.
So the 2023 general elections have come and gone, but not, of course, without some distasteful experiences, difficult to forget or even overlook, especially in the area of violations and electoral offences. Now, Nigerians are already looking forward to the police to prosecute all electoral offenders arrested, and they also expect the judiciary to dispense justice, as of course is known as the last hope of the common man, to also bring all who are culpable to book.
Well, states like Lagos, Ogun, Kano, Benue, and Bayelsa, to mention a few, experienced violence, including vandalization and destruction of electoral materials, as well as, of course, the destruction of voting during the general elections. And there were incidents reported of voter intimidation, voter suppression. Some members of the voting public, and indeed some party officials, were also assaulted, while, of course, an INEC ad hoc staff was killed while discharging electoral duty.
So, during the presidential and National Assembly elections alone, the Inspector General of Police, Usman Baba Alkali, said that about 185 major incidents of election violence were recorded nationwide, and to which he says the police, has also responded. Now, meanwhile, 203 offenders linked to various electoral offenses and sundry crimes were also arrested during the presidential polls, with about 18 firearms of various calibers recovered from political thugs across the country.
In Kano State alone, the State Police Command arrested no fewer than 160 suspects. That was during the March 18th governorship and State House of Assembly elections. And the arrest was in connection with various electoral offenses, ranging from attempted arson to vote buying and destruction of electoral materials, as well as possession of weapons and hard drugs, amongst others.
So in the meantime, Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, has assured Nigerians that the Electoral Offences Act will be finalized before the end of the 9th National Assembly. Kingsley, not to forget that the bill has stayed for a long time, and last year I think the House of Representatives deliberated on it. So we hope that it will be solid. I mean, that's the assurance from the outgoing Speaker of the House of Representatives, and only time will tell if that will materialize or not.
Well, very good point you've raised there. But the key issue, according to many observers, is that you have a surplusage, as it were, of provisions against some of these offenses that violate not just the Electoral Act, but other criminal provisions that we have in our codes, whether in the criminal code or whether in the penal code. And you don't have to wait for a special creation, namely Electoral Offences Act or Electoral Offences Commission, to be able to deal with that. Murder is murder, for instance. Arson is arson. It depends on the circumstance on which
ballot snatching.
Well, ballot snatching, it could be stealing. If you willfully destroy government property, because a ballot box belongs to the government. The ballot papers belong to the government. So if there's willful destruction of property, whether public or private, you have provisions that govern that in our laws. So it is just a speedy trial of these issues that we're also talking about, and the competence of the appropriate agencies. These are issues, of course, we'll be taking a look at in our conversation segment on Good Morning Nigeria today. On which note, welcome you to the program. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Claire Adelabu Abdul Razak. It's Friday's edition, and of course we have our complimentary segments that will come much later. For now, let's join Olajide Bello in the newsroom for highlights of the morning news. Olajide, good morning.
Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria. And here is the news. The House of Representatives has expressed concern over the inefficiency of internet banking services of some commercial banks in the wake of the recent Naira redesign and limit on cash withdrawal policy. Supporting a motion from representatives, Hedges Ogun House members urged the Central Bank of Nigeria to direct commercial banks to overhaul online banking platforms to ease operations.
In using internet banking services across the online banking platforms of most commercial banks in Nigeria has brought untold hardship, suffering and difficulties on Nigerians.
Presidential assent to the bills on the fifth alteration to the 1999 Constitution has further closed gaps in the Constitution, though is welcomed with high hope for Nigeria's socio-economic growth. The 16 bills signed are, however, not up to half of bills transmitted to the executive. 19 of the bills were not lucky to receive the president's signature.
The president thinks that for us to compare the president or the governor to the assembly, houses of assembly or the National Assembly will not be an easy thing for them to comply with. That's perhaps why they did not sign that.
Just that would help solve a lot of issues that we have with the state House of Assembly and the judiciary.
Former Deputy President of the Senate, Ike Ekweremadu, has been found guilty of an organ trafficking plot involving bringing a 21-year-old man to the United Kingdom. Ekweremadu's wife and a medical personnel who served as a middleman were also found guilty of the same offense. Ekweremadu, 60, his wife Beatrice, 56, and Dr. Obinna Obeta, 50, were convicted of conspiring to exploit the man from Lagos of his kidney. Prosecutors told the court that the organ was to be removed and given to the couple's daughter, Sonia, aged 25. Sonia was, however, cleared of the same charge. While it is lawful under the UK law to donate a kidney, it becomes criminal if there is a reward of money or other material advantage. Meanwhile, the convicts are yet to be sentenced. Troops have arrested 32 indigenous people of Biafra IPOB and the Eastern Security Network as terrorists in Enugu, recovered arms and permanent voter cards. This was announced at the Defense Media Operations briefing in Abuja.
Troops conducted cordon and search operations to villages in Igbo, Ize, and Izu, Uzo, North local government areas of Enugu State. During the operations, troops arrested 18 indigenous people of Biafra and Eastern Security Network criminals. Troops also recovered 4 serviceable and 2 unserviceable pump-action guns.
The federal government is upscaling measures to map up illicit arms in the hands of non-state actors. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mr. stated this at a multilateral stakeholders meeting organized by the National Center for the Control of Small Arms and Light Weapons in Nigeria.
We must work together as a region to address the root causes of this terrible problem.
It is therefore imperative that we work together to curb the proliferation of small arms in the Lake Chad Basin region if we must put an end to the senseless and mindless violence.
Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed has applauded the role of the Nigerian Navy in securing Nigeria's territorial integrity. He stated this at a Shipping of Stripes ceremony for 2 retiring senior officers promoted to the rank of 2-star generals.
Any close observer would know the immense role the Navy is playing in securing Nigeria, the significant role the Navy is playing in helping our economy.
The camp of the President-elect Bola Tinubu has described a report making the rounds about the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Olukayode Ariwola, purportedly disguising to meet President-elect Bola Tinubu in London as grossly fake, misleading and malicious. In a statement, the Director, Media and Publicity, APC Presidential Campaign Council, Bayo Ononuga, says the story was a pure concussion from people bent on creating doubts and public distrust about the legitimacy of the recent election, which was won by Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He refutes that there has been no clandestine meeting between the President-elect and the respected Chief Justice of the country anywhere, as against the report which claims that the Chief Justice left Nigeria for London on March 11 on a wheelchair to board a plane ahead of the meeting with President-elect in London. The spokesperson confirms that the President-elect, who left Nigeria Tuesday, has not been in London as he was still in France to have a deserved rest after a hectic campaign. And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Claire and Kingsley.
All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA this Friday. And we're on to business news, and we hear that the federal government and the U.S. are trying to rejig their trade relations by setting up a committee to probably boost trade. And there are lots of questions that should emanate from that. But for details, here is Kunle Ade.
Towards boosting trade between Nigeria, the United States of America and sub-Saharan African countries, the federal government has set up a technical committee to reinvigorate the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Niyi Adebayo, who inaugurated members of the technical committee, noted that the team is expected to develop a streamlined 6-month work plan on the utilization of AGOA with a target of $50 million export volume to the United States, identify 6 focal products according to the geopolitical zones with comparative advantage for effective coordination and actualization of the work plan, as well as develop a budget for the implementation of the work plan. The committee is also expected to provide a platform for public-private partnership to facilitate private sector finance and a strategic guidance on AGOA implementation, monitoring and evaluation in Nigeria. The committee is chaired by the Director of Trade Department, Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, Suleiman Audu, co-chaired by the Executive Director, Nigerian Export Promotion Council, Ezra Yakusak, with the task of exploring ways that Nigeria can fully utilize the opportunities embedded in the African Growth and Opportunity Act. And quickly to the latest of Thursday's tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Ade.
Thank you very much for the business news package on Good Morning Nigeria. Up next for us now is Newspaper Review.
Right, welcome to Newspaper Review segment on Good Morning Nigeria, and time to also welcome Chukwudi Okole Ugbaja Elias Chooks the boy.
Hello, Claire. How are you doing?
With springs on your feet.
Yeah. I
Reminds me of things
the other
apart.
time you practically said there were circles under my eyes.
Now
I've
you
slept them off.
Yes, I can see that.
Kingsley, good morning.
Good morning, Chukwudi.
How are you doing?
Very well, and you?
I'm okay. Could be better, but we thank God for small mercies.
Right.
Okay, so let me start with the blueprint. And the blueprint has is busy, very busy. So let me just start with the story, the headline story, and it's cast this week. Kiyamo to DSS, arrest Obi Dati for incitement, felony over presidential polls. It comes with 2 riders. It says LP's running mate crossed borderline on channel TV interview. Kiyamo seeking political relevance to be his campaign spokesman, and details of that you can find on page 6. And just a little below the nameplates there, you have stories, of course, good stories. Troops neutralize 45 terrorists to rescue 119 kidnapped victims, and beneath it, Kogi Assembly suspends 9 members, 7 LGA chairs over terrorism. And police in Niger rescued 10 abducted children from Abuja orphanage. And so other stories just down the line. I see a picture story here, and that's a picture story of the meeting of the first multilateral meeting with stakeholders of the Lake Chad Basin region in Abuja that held yesterday, and you see the Secretary Secretary to Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, right there in the middle, and of course is flanked by Security Advisor to the President, retired Major General Babagana Mungono, and many others right there. So NYSC pays missing Omale's family instant benefits. Page 8. And cash scarcity to end April, Rwani predicts. Page 22, you can find that. Once again, this is an interesting story. Cash scarcity to end April. Oh God, April. Looks like a long time. And organ trafficking, UK court convicts Ekweremadu wife and doctor. Details of that on page 8. You also heard that in our news. PDP suspends IM Faoshi, 2 others are termed to face disciplinary committee. And Kwara EFCC nabs cleric, twin brothers, 25 others for internet fraud. Niger, 2 brothers, 1 other to die by hanging over businessman's murder. And that's the outlook of the blueprint for today.
There is also the leadership newspaper, and the lead story says, after Enugu and Abia results, INEC under pressure to review Kano, Kaduna, and Ogun polls. Electoral Act gives 7-day window for declaration reversal. Commission yet to fix date for Adamawa and Kebbi supplementary polls. My suspension by PDP kick of dead horse. That's according to Fayoshe. And Nigeria Air to begin operations before May 29th. That's according to Hadi Sirika, the aviation minister. Nigeria Air to begin operations before May 29th. Organ harvesting, that story is already been widely indicated. And Oshun governorship, Adeleke Oyotola, no fate today, page 13. Chukwudi.
Thank you, Kingsley. I think that bit there got it correctly there. Organ harvesting. Clay initially read the organ trafficking. I think there's a little confusion editorially there. Anyhow, it's almost become monomania to us, politics. In the past, starting from February 25, actually pre-February 25, we tend to have forgotten that other aspects of our life, have been important. So I say here, troops neutralize 45 terrorists, rescue 119 kidnapped victims. Operation Heading K in the northeast and Hadal Daji yielding results as gallant soldiers continue toil and sacrifice for country. and you tell the man in green, you put yourselves in harm's way for love of country, God is watching over you. And now this very, very sad one. Senator Ike Ekweremadu, his wife and doctor colleague are convicted over the organ procurement saga, which a British judge has been looking into. His daughter, Sonia, for whom all the effort at getting a kidney was being spent, was happily left off the hook. Ladies and gentlemen, I see that yesterday was a sad day for the country. My wish was that, given the fact that a ranking senator was standing trial in the UK, that there will be some kind of diplomatic intervention that would save us the embarrassment that eventually would seem to have happened.
Why? Why would you say that?
Oh, Senator Ike Ekweremadu, nobody is putting anybody on top of another person, because there is nothing like superiority of the human being. But given his status in our country, I thought that some kind of intervention would happen.
Okay,
well, it's not late for that, or is it?
I think we should be clear about a few things. The Nigerian High Commission in the UK offered its diplomatic support to the Ekweremadu case, if you like, consular support. But it's actually against the law, and it amounts to obstruction of justice for you to be suggesting that you should diplomatically weigh in and then pervert the course of justice. It's obstruction of justice.
Yes.
That's one. But it is now at the sentencing stage that you may plead for allocutors.
That's coming up in May.
In May, yes, allocutors. Not that there's an alleged offense, and you say, oh no, as people you will find in some other jurisdictions, oh, it's a big man, it's this. He did not commit the offense along with his wife and others as a senator. He did it in his personal capacity. So that's that. And the delegation from the Nigerian National Assembly also was in the UK to give him moral support,
yes.
And several other persons were also there. But to say, what was the diplomatic aspect that you were referring to? To say, don't try him, or okay, bring him back to Nigeria to come and try him in Nigeria. We know that there could be such arrangement, but do we have the provisions in our laws for such offense? Was the offense committed in Nigeria? Part of it, of course, would have been committed in Nigeria, where the person was taken out, to go to the United Kingdom. But to seek to obstruct justice by saying interfere, I think that would be pushing it rather far. Yes.
I
have another point to make on this issue.
Yes, but I don't think that's the point Chukwudi is raising. Now that he's been found guilty, he's been convicted. Probably, I don't know. Is it out of place within our laws or within international law that our country would request for extradition, and then for him and his wife to come and serve, the terms here?
That's not what Chukwudi was saying.
Now,
is that not the kind of intervention you're asking?
First of all, I want to thank Kingsley for being prompted and he coming out with what I expected him to say. I like that clarification. Okay. The lady that has her eyes blindfolded, the scale of justice, tells you that the law is no respecter of persons. Still, I want to ask, if a United States senator committed a crime in Nigeria here, or is suspected to have committed a crime in Nigeria, would you really think that the trial will go the whole hog and that some intervention would not happen? I know we are talking the law. I know we are talking justice. But sometimes it's not black and white all the time. There are shades of color between these two cardinal colors. That's the point I was making. Yes.
I already explained. Well,
yes,
I already explained that. The other issue I would like to talk about on this matter is as follows. And I think we dealt with this when the incident first broke last year, following the arrest of Ekweremadu and his wife. That this is a painful human interest story, because no parent or parents would watch their child wither and then pass away without seeking to offer help, wherever that help will come from. Their daughter, 25 years old, Sonia, has renal issues, not necessarily of her own making. And if you are a person of means and you think you can provide support, why not? It was in the process of doing that, as any of us as parents. I mean, I have children, we all have children, and most of our viewers also have children. The key thing for you to do is let me be sure that my child survives and lives. That's the key thing. But I also said, so just a minute, that sometimes we try not to, we tend not to avail ourselves of information and opportunities available in our country. In fact, after that incident, and we had a conversation yet again around renal care in Nigeria, which has to do care for the kidney, a transplant being the ultimate if a kidney is diseased. And I recall that amongst the discussions we had was a certain doctor, his name escapes me now, who was at St. Nicholas Hospital. He joined us from Lagos. He led the team that performed the first kidney transplant in West Africa. And there are facilities in Nigeria, including here in Abuja, where kidney transplant can take place. There is a hospital, I won't name the name, I won't give the name of the hospital, it doesn't amount to advertising, where you have no fewer than 30 dialysis machines. A doctor, a nephrologist from that hospital was part of our guest when we were discussing this subject matter, and he says that transplant, of course, is done in hospitals in Nigeria with competent hands, and the rate of survival is quite high. And there was also a subtext, and this is part of what we sometimes fail to realize with medical tourism. At the drop of a hat, go to India. At the drop of this one, go to UK, go to elsewhere. After surgery care is important. This hospital, they have their own facility. They also have like a guest house. Assuming you live far away, after the surgery, you are advised to stay in that guest house. So if a crisis arises, the ambulance is sent to you. Within a couple of minutes, you are back in the hospital. So, assuming people didn't have this information, of course, they will be looking outside the country as if the expertise were there. And I'm talking about hospitals that are well resourced here in the Federal Capital Territory. And I believe elsewhere in Lagos.
You know, Kingsley,
Yes.
you almost make me cry. My father died of complete heart block. He needed a pacemaker to live. We couldn't afford it. You know, what pains me is that it is not a crime for you to get a kidney from another person. They are faulting the procedure, you know, because they said that pecuniary benefit, giving money to somebody was involved somewhere. I read it up yesterday, you know. That's why I feel very bad about it, you know.
Chukute, we have just a minute to go.
Okay, you can round it up, please.
Okay, so
you have something there?
No.
Or do you want to talk about the PDP suspending Anyim Fayose or Tom to face a disciplinary committee? And I'm asking here, is there something I'm missing? Because I thought Tom contested on the platform of the Labour Party. Please correct me if it's not it. Is he still in the PDP? Then Fayose, the man credited with the phrase stomach infrastructure, says that his suspension, he likens his suspension to the kick of a dead horse. I didn't know he was a literary giant as well, you know. Anyway,
well, a few days ago he was drinking champagne and toasting to the fact. He videoed himself and they released it, and in those words toasted the fact that Tambuwal had some disappointment because the candidates for the governorship election in Sokoto lost. The closing sentence of that video clip,
how old is the champagne he's drinking?
I don't know. Wike takes, according to Wike, 40-year-old whiskey. So the champagne, I think we
as we round it up, Claire, I want to ask
Chukudi, let me just say that because there were 2 bottles of champagne there.
Yeah.
One looked like Moët, and then the other looked like Cristal.
You know them.
But yeah, I do, of course.
You know them.
I do, yeah. So when he was pouring the last one, he was very careful so that it doesn't spill. He said, Tambuwal is gone.
These are our leaders.
How did we get to this dangerous
now you know those who, you know their brands. You know their brands.
No.
All right.
I mean, what are
Yeah,
So you know about that.
Thank you.
It's not a gogoro, that's the point. Bye-bye.
All right. So let's take a short break. We'll be right back.
Background report from our correspondent, Oyemi Ajayi.
The year 2023 general elections cannot be forgotten anytime soon. Though it has come and gone, many say issues that came up during the elections cannot just be washed away just like that. As expected, Nigerians came out in their numbers to exercise their civic responsibilities under the sun and in the rain. And at last, their voices were heard loud and clear, with the permanent voter cards deciding the fate of the candidates. However, some anomalies that occurs during the elections cannot just be swept under the carpet. For example, in Kano State, 161 suspects were arrested due to various electoral offenses, including attempted arson, vote buying, destruction of electoral materials and possession of weapons and hard drugs. Pockets of violence were as well recorded in parts of the country, with INEC ad hoc staff killed, aside vandalization and destruction of electoral materials. Some of the culprits were arrested, while many others seem to have escaped, though the Nigerian police have promised not to leave any stone unturned in apprehending the perpetrators. But many believe such corrupt acts shouldn't be experienced anymore, knowing well the large amount budgeted to the electoral umpire INEC to confront some of these challenges. What lessons can be said to have been learned in the just concluded general elections? How should the arrested culprit be prosecuted? These are some questions begging for answers from guests already seated in the studio.
All right, that background report was put together by our correspondent, Yemi Uyemi, and we thank you for that. So let's quickly begin our introductions, and I'll start right here from the studio. We have the Assistant Director, Department of Public Prosecution of the Federal Ministry of Justice, and we have Tamara Tare Ali Boze. He's right here. Thank you very much, Tamara. Can I call you Tamara?
You
Tamara.
can, yes.
All right. Thank you very much. And also with us from our Port Harcourt studio, we have a constitutional lawyer and a public commentator, Festus Oguche. Good to see you. It's a long time.
So good. Good morning, Nigeria. Thank you very much.
All right. We also have joining us from our Bernie Kebbi studio. That's the capital of Kebbi State. Learned Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mazi Afam Osigwe. Afam Osigwe, if we're able to get him on air now, that would just be fine. Now, we understand it's not coming up just yet. We're also expecting another guest to be with us from Kaduna studios once our engineers clear that up. But let's begin the conversation with Chief Festus Oguche in Port Harcourt. Mr. Oguche, once again, we're glad to see you. Now, let's put it a bit starkly. Many decent persons around the country and even outside were horrified by the incidents of violence, voter suppression, and wanton destruction of public property as well as even private property in the course of the elections. No fewer than 20-something persons are reported to have been killed in the course of the 2023 elections. Many would say still, this is not a surprise. After all, we've had it in the previous election cycles. And not much came out of those things. In other words, probably just business as usual. Offenses have been committed, and many would say these are offenses committed in the course of elections. Is that the way to go?
The fact that it's not the first time it is happening, it is becoming part of our tradition, part of our elections conduct, that elections are seen here as warfare. The only thing is that there hasn't been much adequacy in the apprehension and prosecution of offenders or people who commit offenses day of election, and maybe for the fact that the authorities look at it as something that's not worthy of pursuit. But then it's beginning to boil down to the reality of our electoral process, that free, fair, credible election can only be possible if it is done in an atmosphere of peace and security. And that is lacking, then it becomes a very big problem. And it's a very big problem with us, particularly those of us who are living here in Port Harcourt State, which has been confirmed as the hotbed of electoral militants and electoral thuggery. I remember the time passed that we have some of us who have to move our families out of town for their own safety, and at the time the tribunals, the House of Assembly Tribunal, Governorship Elections Tribunal, I think that was in 2015, had to be shifted from Rivers State to Abuja because of the incidents and level of high level of violence that rocked the state then. And the same thing is replicated in almost all the states of the Federation: killings, abductions, thuggery, destruction of lives and property. And it's very clear that the government or the authorities are not very interested in pursuing it. And the reason is not far-fetched, because at the end of the day, those people that get elected into political office want to get their supporters out of the way of prosecution. After all, a lot of the incidents of thuggery and violence are being perpetrated at their own instance, and that also tells us so much about the political character, or rather the character of our political elites, that they want to get it by all means. The desperation is beginning to push them into arming young people and pushing them into committing those crimes just to get into elective political office, and when they get there, they tend to protect them. And that also explains why there's a very low level of prosecution, low level of conviction of people who perpetrate electoral offenses. You find out also very well, Kingsley, that they are reigning everywhere during elections, no matter the amount of sensitization that's made, the amount of security that's deployed. They are there all over the place, ready to do anything to get their way.
All right, Festus Oguche, thank you for your opening contributions. Let's get to bring Kebi's studio, where Mazi Afam Osigwe is joining us from. If we can see Mazi Afam Osigwe. All right, Mazi, good to see you. Just in line with Kingsley's question, I would like you to really explain to us, within the context of election and democracy, what we mean by election offenses. We've heard so many numbers coming from Kaduna during this election. Has 161 people arrested for election offenses. The IGP says about 200 people. In Lagos, we have 23 people arrested, but 5 for election offenses. So please, can you put them into context, what we mean and what constitute election offenses or offenses during the election period?
At the electoral process, the voters, the electoral officials, or at the outcome of the electoral process. So it could either be a deal with the voting process, the voters, the election of electoral officials. So there are different provisions under the Electoral Act which criminalizes these activities. So beyond criminalizing them, beyond arresting them, the real problem is the failure or the inability to prosecute them. So we have reported their same.
All right, we're trying to get a connection with the bring Kebi studio right. I will return to Mazi Afam Osigwe as soon as we get the clearance to do that. But let's, I don't know, our studio in Kaduna, can we go to Kaduna? All right, we have Aminu Abdul Rashid. Good to see you, Malam Aminu. Can you hear me? If you can, just what exactly are we dealing with when we talk about election? Kingsley, take over the button.
Well, we have to
technology is...
apologize to our viewers because we're having issues with our network centers in Birni Kebbi as well as Kaduna. But that, of course, will be cleared up, and we'll take advantage of the presence and, of course, potential contribution of the two legal practitioners. Afam Osigwe, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, was already breaking it down. But let's bring in the Assistant Director in the Department of Public Prosecutions in the Office of the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Justice. That's Tamara Alebozi. Alebozi, again, the question that I posed to Festus Oguche earlier with regard to what appears to be public perception that even though you have a plenitude of provisions in the Electoral Act, in the Criminal Code, in the Penal Code, relating to a number of offenses that would appear to be freely committed in the course of electioneering and the conduct of elections, there would appear to be some tardiness in following through with the law and dealing with these persons.
Well, actually, like you rightly said, most of these offenses are not only restricted to the Electoral Acts. Some of them are contained in our regular provisions of the Penal Code and the Criminal Codes. And the Electoral Acts on its own empowers INEC under Section 145 of the Act to prosecute electoral offenses. Now, besides INEC prosecuting electoral offenses, the Attorney General's Office, also under Section 174 of the Constitution, can also initiate, take over, and continue prosecutions. Likewise, state governments too can do same via their Attorney Generals. And the police also, by virtue of Section 66 of the Police Act, is empowered to prosecute some of these offenses also. Once investigations are completed, for those of us in the Office of Attorney General, be it the federal or the state, once police or the various investigating authorities complete their investigations, they forward these files to the various prosecuting agencies for them to advise whether there is a prima facie case that has been established against these persons. And once any prima facie case has been established, prosecutions go on. Now, I am not aware that there has been any electoral offense, stricto sensu, forwarded by the police to the Office of the General as at present. But I know that most of all these offenses could come in form of murder, arson, and the rest of them, and most of the states' laws also make provisions for prosecution of some of these offenses. So where they come under penal codes or the state's the state offenses, the state's Ministry of Justice and prosecuting agencies could prosecute in that regard. So it's not, it's only mostly when some of those offenses happen in the FCT, then the Federal Ministry of Justice can come in to prosecute. But if they are to be prosecuted in other states based on other provisions of the law, then other ministries of justice for the states, police and other agencies could prosecute. So it's not stricto sensu something that is left for the Honorable Attorney General's chambers alone.
Okay, thank you. We'll still get back to you, but let's, I'm told we can now connect with Mazi Afam Osigwe, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Mazi, we do apologize for the hiccup. We're back to you now. Just a recap of my question. I mean, before even talking about prosecuting or arresting and all that, you know, I think it would be proper for us to even understand what constitutes election offenses. What exactly are we dealing with? And to what extent, you know, did it did it affect the general elections, the just concluded general elections?
Thanks. Well, electoral offences or election are those offences, are those acts which the law has outlawed or forbidden, and some of it are geared at disrupting the electoral process, perverting it, or subverting the will of the people, or stopping the people from participating in the process. And these offences, as the Assistant Director of Public Prosecution said, could be found in the Electoral Act or in the Penal Code or Criminal Code. So they can come in different forms. It could be murder when a person is murdered, even though the murder aspect of it is not provided for in the Electoral Act. But basically, these are offences committed in the course of campaign, in the course of the conduct of the election, in declaration of result. So it could be directed at individuals, the voters, the officers involved in the conduct of the election, the security agencies, party officials, or even ordinary citizens. So now, persons who are involved in them, in order to ensure that a particular outcome is achieved, either to ensure that the ballots are destroyed, that the votes are not counted, that people are not able to vote, or that people do not come out at all, or driven away from voting. So like I said, they come in different forms, so it depends on what you're saying. When you're talking about general election, you have mentioned a few figures coming from the state about the large number of persons who were arrested. So these are persons who, depending on the allegations against them, committed different aspects of these electoral offences, as I have referred to earlier, which are directed at, in one way or the other, adversely affecting the outcome of the general election, either to their favour or to the disfavour of another person.
I still want to stay with you, Mazi Afam, and this is to clarify for the benefit of our viewers. Have we reached the stage in our criminal jurisprudence that we make a distinction and say, oh, these are necessarily offences committed in the course of elections, so they will be dealt with, especially the same way you have election petitions being dealt with sui generis? But there are categories of offences that are committed. Is there a mindset, from the practitioner's point of view, that tends to be tolerant, if you may, of offences committed in the course of elections versus offences that are committed outside of electoral cycles? Oh, somebody assaults another person, oh, it's in the course of election. Somebody burns down the house of another deliberately, oh, it's in the course of election. Somebody wields an AK-47 or even a Beretta pistol illegally, and so we said, no, the Firearms Act will not apply. Is there some fuzziness in terms of our criminal jurisprudence in this regard?
Now, every society must deploy the powers of the state to ensure that persons who are alleged to have violated its laws are prosecuted. And it doesn't matter whether they are electoral, financial, or economic crimes, or terrorism, whichever form it comes in. Now, if we start again to suggest that because these are electoral offences, they should be fast-tracked in our court, the courts are already overworked. And I keep insisting that we cannot continue to lay emphasis on politics and the electoral process in clogging up the dockets of our courts to the disadvantage of commercial transactions, human rights cases, and other cases that will help to build confidence in administration of criminal justice. We cannot continue to amend our laws to insist that these cases be fast-tracked while others are allowed to languish in the dockets of our courts. No, we cannot. But the more important thing to do in this case is to show the will to prosecute these offences. So many persons are routinely arrested during the elections and they are never prosecuted. So I think that emphasis should be on ensuring that these matters are taken to court, not on insisting that they should move at a very fast pace.
All right, Senior Advocate of Nigeria's Leonard Sheikh Mazi Afam will get back to you. If we can also bring in Aminu Abdul Rashid into our conversation to also x-ray, for me, again, whether there was a preponderance of election offences in the just concluded election that should be of concern to us, and therefore should, be of interest to prosecutors.
Just like my colleagues said, electoral offenses, you can find about 43 electoral offenses in our newly Electoral Act 2022. The offenses spread across that Electoral Act, and also you can find the offenses that are committed on the election day, which we are more interested in this conversation. Electoral offenses mostly that are committed during the election are suppression of voters, undue influence, subverting the election process, offenses committed by electoral officers, connivance with the police, and also some party agents and some talks and some of the sponsors. Like if the arrest made across the country is mostly some hoodlums who try to interfere with the election process, destroy ballot boxes, snatch them, and sometimes some of these thugs kidnap or abduct some of the officials so that the outcome of election will not be pronounced, or the election result could not be collected normally. So these are some of the election offenses that are committed mostly on the election day and during the election day. But there are other offenses spread across that Electoral Act which not on election day, like subverting some information and facts by political parties to INEC, which carry different punishment. Mostly, you see the punishments found in the Electoral Act are fines. A fine comes first, then imprisonment. The highest is 10 years imprisonment, and the highest fine is 50 million naira. So even though you can also find some offenses committed on the election day that their punishment are even much more than what the Electoral Act provided for. For example, the unwanted destruction of properties that led to arson or loss of lives, the other criminal laws, our other criminal laws already provided for stiffer punishment, like life imprisonment, and also even other punishments that leads to death sentences. So if we can bring it down to the mind of general public, electoral offenses committed during the day of election, Electoral Act provided for and empowered INEC to prosecute same, and lack of publicity in dealing with those offenders or those alleged to have committed those offenses, give people some kind of fear that or give confidence to those that are committing those offenses that even if they committed this offense, nothing will happen at the end of the day. And also the investigation is usually limited to the offenders, those that are arrested on the field committing those offenses, through investigation to even find or bring the sponsors, which mostly are bigwigs in the field of politics in Nigeria, to book, is one of the reasons why you see we have prevalence of these offenses always in during election times.
Thank you very much, Aminu Abdul Rashid, for your explanation. But I just wanted you to, excuse me, still make a contribution with regard to the question I posed to Afam Osigo earlier. Namely, yes, we know that there are offenses in the Electoral Act, but there are also antecedent offenses that you would find prescribed in the Criminal Code or in the Penal Code. And the whole idea of prosecuting persons who have committed those offenses is to say, look, there should be no distinction. I know Afam Osigo already said that every society must be ready to cleanse itself of persons who commit infractions against its laws. Why do we appear, that's the issue, why do we appear in our criminal jurisprudence to be somewhat tolerant and say, okay, these are offenses committed in the course of elections? As you have said, if a person is in possession of a firearm without a license, the Firearms Act is pretty clear as to what to do. If you destroy or damage a person's vehicle in the course of your political rally, the law is also clear. You don't have to go to the Electoral Act. If you decide to burn down your opponent's house, it's also clear. These are things that happen if you decide to destroy ballot papers and so on and so forth. Why is it that we don't appear to move swiftly as a deterrence, which is what the law ordinarily anticipates? Abdul Rashid.
You see, I agree with you that elections or the process of providing leadership in this country is very important. Thereby, the lawmakers clearly provided for offenses in the Electoral Act. And it is better that offenses that are committed because or as a reason of election process should be dealt with differently from those offenses that are found in our other laws, penal laws and other criminal laws we have in the country. Also, I also share the view of INEC chairman and other people contributed during the bill to provide for Electoral Offences Commission, whereby these offenses committed during election or as a result because of election should be given priority and be dealt with in no time, so that it will deter other people from conceiving an idea of disrupting election process. Because if we believe or we say because other offenses can be found in other laws, it can also go along with the other normal cases that are in our courts. Our courts are already over, and it can be missed along the line in the stream of other cases that are laying, thousands of cases that are laying before our courts. But if it is given a special consideration, a special publicity, it will at least reduce the volume of these offenses. Even the people that were arrested, there are fewer than the offenses that are committed during this election, because IGP was talking about not more than 200 arrests made, even though there are more than 170 arrests in the state. You see, what happened across the country is so huge that if allowed, people will continue to commit these offenses because of election, and the prosecution and punishment will take time to the extent that people will even forget that committing these offenses because of election is something big, and also continue to perpetrate these offenses during the election.
Right, thank you very much, Aminu Abdul Rashid. We'll get back to you. We're back here in Abuja, and Tamara Tare. I'm again just wondering, if we have, the offences spelled out in both the, new electoral law and also the penal code, as the learned Silk and Aminu had indicated, and also you. Why then is it difficult to, prosecute these offenders? Because all we hear is they've been arrested, maybe during in-election period. You hear that, okay, election offenders will be arrested, just as we're hearing now. We hear Kanu arrest, we hear the IGP's arrest. But at the end of the day, nothing is said about prosecuting these people or even convicting them. Why is it so difficult when we already have a law to that effect? Is there any other entanglement that we don't know?
Well, I would not say it's a bit difficult. Maybe in the case of INEC, they might not be having that capacity because they are already concentrating on the electoral processes.
Whose responsibility is it to prosecute election offenders?
The Act stipulates in Section 145 that INEC shall prosecute offenders under any electoral offences under the Act, and or legal practitioners that it can engage to prosecute on its behalf. So INEC under the Act has that power to prosecute. Now, like I said, it does not stop the Attorney General's office in federal or the state Attorney General's office from, prosecuting based on the constitutional powers under Section 174 as pertains to the Federal Attorney General of the Police, or Section 211 as it applies to the state Attorney Generals. So they can also prosecute, but the Act stipulates that it is INEC that has the responsibility to prosecute. Now, if INEC is already being saddled or overwhelmed with its constitutional function of conducting elections, you find out that it will be difficult for INEC to now want to concentrate in the prosecution of most of these offences. So they tend to relegate the prosecution of these offences to the background. And that is why you see that most people commit these offences, and at the end of the day, they can get away with it. But just like the recommendation from the Justice Uwe's panel report on the electoral reform stipulated that the prosecutorial powers of INEC with regards to election offences should be moved to a special body. That was where the promulgation or the establishment of this National Electoral Reform Commission came into being.
But you also say your office can equally prosecute.
Yes. We don't investigate. The Office of the Attorney General or the State Ministry of Justice, they don't investigate. They only prosecute after investigations have been concluded and files are forwarded to the Attorney General's office for advice. And where those files are looked into and there are cases that have been established against such suspects, then we go ahead to prosecute. So if files are not forwarded to us, we will not have anything to work with in terms of going for prosecution. But once files are forwarded to the Attorney General's office, both apart from electoral offences, other offences, there are a lot of them, we go out to prosecute.
Okay, Tamara Ali Bozi, thanks a lot. We'll return to you, but I would like Afam Osigwe, SAN, to also speak to this. Mazi Afam, two issues here that I would like us to clear up. Yes, the Electoral Act donates the powers to INEC to prosecute electoral offenses. But we've also identified the fact that there are offenses that are committed in the course of electioneering that can also be located in other statutes, namely the Criminal Code or the Penal Code. or even money laundering provisions. Here we are. INEC, everybody knows it's saddled with too many things in terms of administering the elections, conducting the elections, and so on and so forth. When INEC, in the course of litigation over election matters, is named a respondent, INEC, of course, hires private lawyers to stand in for it, to appear for it. We don't appear to have the case now where INEC is actively engaging private legal practitioners, just like the EFCC or ICPC would, to prosecute electoral offenses. Do we have to wait for the advent of an electoral offenses commission before we have the engagement of private prosecutors engaged by INEC to deal with, or rather to prosecute instances of allegations of electoral offenses? Mazi Afam.
Mr. Kingsley, now, we need to look at two situations here, or scenario, two situations here. Under the Electoral Act, INEC is to prosecute matters referred to it by the court or the tribunal. Then, it also has power to prosecute offenses under the Act. So when you talk about economic and financial crimes, in the economic and financial crimes, which are related to the electoral process, which are not specifically provided for under the Act, I have my doubts whether INEC has power to prosecute such offenses, except where they come by referral from the court under Section 144. Now, I am not able to agree that INEC is overwhelmed by its current work. The starting point is, the Act, even though it gives power to INEC to prosecute offenses under the Act, did not make any provision as to how the police is to conduct its job and hand over the file, or process of compelling the police to hand over these files. Every year, during every election cycle, electoral offenders are arrested. There is no record that proper investigation is done or files handed over to INEC. Like the Assistant Director of Public Prosecution said, the Ministry of Justice cannot prosecute unless investigation is done and files handed over to them. You now imagine how worse it is for INEC. So if the police refuse to investigate, if the police investigate and fails to hand over the files to INEC, there will be nothing for INEC to prosecute. Now, Section 145(2) authorizes INEC to engage private legal practitioners to prosecute offenses. So the issue of being overwhelmed does not come into it. In 2014, the Nigerian Bar Association offered to provide pro bono services to INEC for purposes of prosecuting these matters, such matters. No such matters were ever referred to the NBA. Fast forward to 2023, the NBA has equally made the same commitment, and we are waiting to see whether, by NBA I mean the Nigerian Bar Association, we're waiting to see if cases will be referred, if these private legal practitioners will be engaged by INEC to assist them in prosecuting these cases. We must have, first of all, we must have a will. We must have law enforcement agencies that are willing to do their work, carry out proper investigation, do detailed work, and understand that the prosecutorial powers with respect to such electoral offenses reside in INEC, that they are duty bound, even in the absence of any protocol under the law for handover of these files, to take the files to INEC so that INEC will be better able to carry out its functions. I am not equally able to agree with those who suggest that electoral processes, electoral offenses must have a special commission or a special court. We can't continue to create courts for different things, commission for different things. We have enough provisions in our laws. We have enough capacity, as it were, for these matters to be dealt with. It is the absence of political will. It is the absence of attaching any importance to these matters that is the problem. And what could explain it? Because most of the people who carry out, who perpetrate these acts, or who carry out these electoral offenses have big men behind them. And these men are always able to use their influence to ensure that the process does not work. So if the process works, we'll not be asking these questions. If we're interested in prosecuting them, other than having the optics of arresting them, exhibiting them, showing that they have been apprehended, and then the matter goes to sleep, and nothing ever happens. We must, first of all, show a commitment to prosecuting them, not an insistence on the speed, but ensuring that there is due process of law, that these persons are brought to book, until that there is that willingness. the conversation as to the speed at which the prosecution moves becomes a non-issue. The conversation as to whether there should be a special commission will be a non-issue. The police is there to investigate. The EFCC is there to investigate financial and economic crimes aspect of it. ICPC is there to investigate aspects of it involving public officials. We can't keep creating commissions. We can't keep setting up bodies without any care as to their financial toll on the economy. We can't keep creating bureaucracies. Let us do the little we can with the existing infrastructure we have. Until these infrastructures prove to be incapable of handling this, the conversation about creating more bodies, like I said, is a non-issue.
Thank you very much, Alpha Mosigwe, for your contribution. Just to indicate, Claire, that after the Presidential and National Assembly elections, the Inspector General of Police, while reviewing the performance of the security agencies, did indicate the number of offenses that were recorded throughout the country and the number of arrests that were also made. And the police, of course, were then compiling the case file to be sure that they got the proofs of evidence. And he did say, the police Inspector General was reported as having said that once those files were ready, they should be forwarded immediately to INEC. He did say that, and I'm sure those are offenses relating to the elections. But part of what our guests have been saying this morning is, look, even the police itself, under the Police Act, has powers to prosecute some of these offenses. The same way AFCC has powers to prosecute some offenses. All the see and buy, that's to say this inducement and so on and so forth. I mean, okay, I'll give you an example. In Kaduna, where Abu Rashid is with us, during the state and governorship elections, some EFCC officials were attacked by persons who were about to be apprehended for voter inducement. So that you have a number of offenses there, number of charges rather, that you can draft against such persons, and those you have picked up for voter inducement or whatever, they also could go for it. So is it just, again, that's the mental issue I'm talking about. Everybody say, oh, INEC, if INEC doesn't do this, then we are hamstrung. You have a broad range of authorities that can prosecute these offenses and get them into the lamb as quickly as possible.
Well, let's get Chief Festus Oguche's point of view here. I mean, Chief Oguche, you've listened to the Silk Talk, you've listened to Tamara here, and of course Kingsley's own summary of it. But I don't just get it, really. I don't just get it. It would appear that the issue is with the prosecuting authority now, which everyone is pointing at, INEC, whether INEC has the capacity to really prosecute election offenders effectively, or whether there is need for an adjunct commission or thereabout, as Justice Uwais commission report did indicate. I don't know what you think. Do you think that is necessary, or that INEC really is not overwhelmed by its responsibilities?
First of all, that the election electoral offences and violence become part of our elections process, and it require very extraordinary circumstances and moves to get it stopped or to nip it in the bud. I listened to the discussions, the propositions of the rest of the discussants, and I think it's very, very important to understand that we have to fashion out a system that will best suit us in the circumstance that we deserve. Now that electoral offences have come to be the 4 points of our election process, I think a lot more serious attachments be made to what we are going to put on ground to ensure that it stops. What is important is the effectiveness of the apprehension and prosecution of electoral offenders. That is very, very important. And if we go outside our own jurisdiction and look at how these things are done, in the U.S., for instance, there's a special department, they call it Sexual Offenses Branch, in the Department of Justice that takes care of that aspect, alongside with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. In Canada, it's the same thing also. In Britain, there's a Crown Prosecution Service, specially designated to handle elections offences. The idea of having these offenses in the penal code, in the criminal codes and all that has been sufficient. I totally disagree with that, because electoral offenses must be fashioned towards the designation of those offenses, it must pertain to those offenses, it must have relative connection with those offenses. If a murder, for instance, is committed, it can be taken care of by the penal code or criminal code regarding that particular offense, but then if it's committed within the context of the elections, it's a different offense altogether. The establishment of an electoral offences commission, that was a key point of the Justice Mohammed Uwais commission report. A commission that is saddled with that responsibility to prosecute. When you now say that the EFCC is there, the police is there, all these arms of government is there, we know what is said, that too many hands spoil the boat, and that's exactly why we are not getting much of effective measures on prosecuting these offenses, prosecuting these felons. The gentleman there, Director of Public Prosecution, there in your studio, had said that he's not aware that the police had brought any file to his office for prosecution. And that also explains why we see footages, we see videos of these offenses being perpetrated, being committed right in the eyes before the police authorities, and they do virtually nothing about it. A lot of names that come up, notorious persons that has been terrorizing the people throughout the conduct of these elections in Lagos, in Port Harcourt, all over the place, and there's virtually nothing the police does about it. And electoral offenses are not even restricted to the offenses committed by individual voters or thugs and all that. There are those committed by officials of INEC in the course of elections, and there are lots of situations like that, reports like that have been made public. The police is sitting there, is not doing anything about it. I just left the police headquarters yesterday over a report about one polling unit officer jetting out with disappearing with the election materials, Pukula Kingdom, and the police we had to go into argument on their power to prosecute. We have the Electoral Act, and we have the electoral offences provisions in that act, but we have to look at it strictly whether those provisions, whether the offences defined there are comprehensive and elaborate enough to take care of every incidence of electoral offense. In Lagos, for instance, during the last election, some communities were declaring festivals or one particular festival on election day. And I read the Electoral Act, and I know that you are not supposed to have meetings within the vicinity of a polling unit. And if you are imposing a traditional festival on like election day specifically, of course it offends the Electoral Act, and the police did nothing about it. I don't know how EFCC comes in this regard, except maybe to check for those who are buying votes and for those who are getting gratifications one way or the other. But the whole essence of our electoral jurisprudence, specifically regards to the criminal area of the criminal aspects of the elections, should be put in a very proper perspective, not just necessarily pigeonholing them into several perspectives, but to ensure that an electoral offences commission is set up. It is not just putting electoral offences in the Electoral Act. That is how it is done in India, in Australia, even in the United States. In the United States, there's a difference between federal offences and state offences, electoral offences, because the elections in the US is conducted, they are conducted within state jurisdictions. But then it is just harmonizing them into one pool towards having an effective commission whose responsibility is solely to arrest and prosecute electoral offenders. In that way, you have a more effective and a more efficient system that will ensure that this seeming overburdensome attitude of some of our people towards elections is nipped in the bud. Because if you don't do that, of course, we keep advancing from one level to the other in terms of violence. The elections, the electoral offences committed this year far exceeds the one of 2015. Before the 2015 election, we were crying about the situation until we discovered that there are more electoral offences are being added to it, and that is why I'm talking about the comprehensiveness and elaborateness of the electoral offences as stipulated under the Electoral Act, and see ways how they can be expanded to include every shade of offence that will be committed within the context of elections. Yes.
First of all, thank you very much for your contribution. I was just wondering, again, for the benefit of our viewers, I think that part of the issue is that, look, some of these offenses have been committed. We have seen the video clips and all that. Are we going to wait for the advent of an Electoral Offences Commission before these offenses are prosecuted? What advantage do we take of existing laws to deal with these offenses so that going forward?
All right, welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria, and we're looking at election offenses and, of course, prosecution. So let's, I think I need to come back to the studio here and, engage the Assistant Director, Department of Public Prosecution. And I'm wondering, I know that you've talked about the fact that a new electoral commission might not be necessary in view of, the plethora of laws and all that. But I was just looking at some of the provisions, the offenses, and I discovered that the Ways Commission, on the proposed electoral commission, offenses bill, it had captured some of the emerging election offenses that we saw happen, within this general election, but not so in the Electoral Act. For instance, I read out to you an offense in the Electoral Offences Commission bill. It has just a moment. It has an offense that relates with stirring up ethnic, religious or social hatred. That's one. It also has campaign that is, fashioned to undermine the independence, sovereignty, and unity of Nigeria, and is capable of causing people to vote on the basis of any religion, tribe, or language, amongst others, with a punishment of 20 years imprisonment without fine. So you still think that a commission is not necessary?
I was not against the establishment of the commission. I had said that the commission, just as recommended by the Ways panel, could come in handy to coordinate and give a vigorous fight to the investigation and prosecution of some of these matters. And it does not take away the fact that even if a commission is set up, the other agencies that statutorily have powers to prosecute can still prosecute. But the National Electoral Reform, the Electoral Commission could come in just like the EFCC. It has the powers of investigation. It has the powers to also prosecute in-house.
Because it's obvious. It's obvious that as it is now, those responsible with prosecuting, election offenders are not up to it. They are not up to it, and that's why this issue is a concern, and that's why we're discussing it. So if there is a lacuna, it means the lacuna must be filled.
Well, I don't think there is a lacuna.
So why are offenders not being prosecuted?
Well, if the police conclude their investigations ordinarily, they will forward to the agencies that are ready to prosecute, and they will prosecute.
And the police is not doing that.
Like I said, the police even has powers to even prosecute on its own. Still, after investigating, it can prosecute. But with or without the Electoral Reform Commission, we can make do with what we have for the meantime. They finish their investigations. They can send to the Ministry of Justice still to send to INEC. Even the police can still prosecute. And where some of these offences are found in the penal codes in the states, they can send to those state Ministry of Justice still too, and prosecutions can take place.
Okay, Tamara, thank you very much. I want to return to Mazi Afam Osigwe in Kebbi. That's Berry Kebbi studios of the NTA. Mazi Afam. Well, we've been talking about probably tardiness in prosecution or just a small number. Perhaps we should, I mean, if I say we now, I'm talking about those of us in the media, maybe we also look inwards. Publicity of trials and judgments is recognized in media practice as well as in the legal profession itself, except with the exceptions being created for certain kinds of trials, namely that will go in camera, namely trials of juveniles or persons of underage. Is it that the media, for instance, is not focusing sufficiently on ongoing trials? I'll give you two examples. We know that in the past, I think a professor or two have been convicted. They were returning officers in the course of the elections, and they were charged for finagling, trying to manipulate the outcome of the elections. And they were tried, convicted, and sentenced. I don't know whether they're out of the Correctional Services Center right now. The Ekiti governorship elections also took place last year, and I recall that the EFCC made a number of arrests of persons who were trying to engage in voter inducement. The last I heard of it was that they had gone to court, and but there appears to be not much information coming out. Is it that the media is not bringing its searchlight sufficiently on these trials and then giving the trials the required visibility?
And other things. It could be that very few of these prosecutions are taking place, and it could also be that because usually the people who are involved in some of these people who are taken to court are the small fries. They are not the big men. So usually maybe the media does not consider, the media don't consider them high-profile cases worthy enough of their attention. But I think all in all, the emphasis should be on ensuring that where proper investigation is done, that these matters are charged to court. And the media could do well where such cases take place, not minding that they are not high-profile cases, attention should be paid to them. The society must show a commitment towards prosecuting such matters. These brazen acts continue to get worse and morph into more frightening dimensions because the state has not shown any major commitment towards prosecuting them. And I'm afraid that this may really get out of hand in another election cycle if people feel that those who did it on this current session, that nothing happened to them. Crime and punishment are about deterrence. And when people commit crime and nothing happens to them, it will enable others to commit those crimes and take them up to higher levels. So these crimes should be investigated, they should be prosecuted, and where they are being prosecuted or sentences handed down, the media should also draw attention to them to also sound as a warning to those who may be planning to get involved in these things, or that the state is watching and will take appropriate actions to visit those acts with sanctions. So beyond blaming the media for not giving them publicity, we should focus more on getting these matters into court. And we do not need a commission, I reiterate, for these things to be done. We have enough provisions. Ministry of Justice, as Mr. Kamara said, can take over these matters and prosecute them. We don't need to have a commission in place to do these things. And to be able to justify the clamor for a commission, let us have the statistics. How many of such offenses have been taken to court? How many of such investigations have been concluded and files handed over? How many are those? How many? What is the capacity of INEC to handle these cases? Or what has hampered the prosecution of these cases? Is it the inability of INEC to get them to court, or the fact that nobody considers these investigations worthy enough to take the files to INEC? Or maybe when in a particular state it is the opposition that is involved in it, then the matters go to court. If it is the people, if it is the members of the party in power in a particular area that perpetrate it, then those matters never get investigated. Could this be part of the problem? We should get at the root cause of the problem rather than focusing on creating this, creating that, giving publicity to them. How well are these matters investigated? Is any person failing to take action where investigation is taking place to get them prosecuted? Until we answer these questions, we'll be skirting the issues. We do not prioritize the prosecution of electoral offenses. That is our problem. And like I said, it is because of the big man syndrome. Those beating the drums are the big masquerades who are sitting in their homes, comfortable homes and offices, who ensure that these persons are encouraged to perpetrate this action with a promise that nothing will happen to them. And indeed, nothing happens to them. And that's why it gets worse.
Senior advocate, thank you. Let's bring in Malam Aminu Abdul Rashid. And quickly, I'm just wondering that the offenses are committed within the election. You know, they could be pre-election or post-election, in election. These are, actions committed within the election cycle. And I'm wondering why they're not treated equally as election matters. Therefore, they have time frame within which prosecution can be completed. Because I learned that they do not have a time frame. So, the investigation and prosecution takes such a long time to the extent that even those lawyers representing the offenders just giving and discontinue the case. So why is it that they are not also treated as election matters? That's one. And secondly, to what extent do you think the action of, usually during elections, policemen are posted from one state to the other, and these are the people that also, record the incidents that take place within those domain. And then after the election, they are disbanded and reposted. So it also makes gathering of information and investigation difficult. Therefore, prosecution, is still later. I don't know. What are your views on these two issues?
Paul, I have an issue with even the arrangement of the offences in the Electoral Act. The arrangement is scattered along different sections of that Electoral Act instead of codifying it in one particular section of the Electoral Act, and also the punitive measures or the penalties of those offences are usually fines, if the sections are meant to generate revenue for the government, instead of making the fine as an alternative punishment. Also, if you look at the offences, the provisions in that Electoral Act provided for fewer offences being committed as election offences. There are like more than 100. At least you can find offences that can be committed before, during, after election. But only, I think, 43 are provided for in that Electoral Act, and is scattered, and is also more of generating income for the government. If you look at going to your question, why is it that all I'm trying to say is that if there is commission in place,
there is a freeze there coming from our Kaduna Network Center. Abdul Rashid was flying, and but he's made some very valuable points. Okay, Abdul Rashid, we understand you are back.
For proving that those offences will be there, and also if there are, feel like when you mention of that go for election process will be going back to their respective places at the end of election process, you will find there are hardly or scanty facts to support the prosecution of those offences. So if it is a commission with dedicated manpower and also mandate, and what they are particularly going to find and forwarded for prosecution is going to be better than the way it is now. Even the arrest of the offenders, if you see the number, they are much fewer than the actual offences committed on the field across the country. So if a commission is put in place with its agents across the country, they will be concentrated in looking for offences and offenders, and also carry out a thorough and deep investigation, not just to actors on the field, but even the sponsors, and also take care of giving evidence during the prosecution and ensuring the punishment of the offenders at the end of the day, and especially if given wide publicity by media.
Thank you very much. Well, there's the prospect again in your submission for the establishment of a commission. But the question we keep asking is, there are offenses that have been committed in the course of the 2023 general elections. Okay. Are we going to wait for the enactment of an act setting up a commission and for the operationalization of that commission before these offenses are punished? There's an immediate task at hand. What do we do in the circumstance? I want to come back very quickly to Tamara Alebozi. Perhaps this question should go to the Attorney General of the Federation. I wouldn't know whether assistant directors attend the National Council of meetings, usually for the Attorneys General of the state and of the Federation. How concerning this matter would be, whether it is one that has come up that there are state offenses committed in the election cycle, not necessarily election offenses. We have said it plain and pop. Arson is arson, murder is murder. Illegal possession of firearms is illegal possession of firearms. But that would be a federal offense. Then, of course, assault. These are things, causing bodily injury. These are state offenses. That's one. Whether these are matters that the Council of Attorneys General, whether this is a matter that they have considered and said, look, what do we do? That's one. Secondly, in raising all of these matters, are we diminishing the powers that the Constitution has donated to the Attorney General of the Federation or the Attorney General of a state to initiate, discontinue, take over, or otherwise any matter over which there is competence? Any matter, if the INEC, for instance, has issues or is not willing or is pressed for time, why don't you go there and then exercise your powers under the Constitution? Very quickly, Tamara.
Well,
in 2 minutes.
Well,
yes, please.
There is nothing stopping the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation and that of the states from prosecuting current crime electoral offenses that have happened in this election cycle and even the previous ones. Once investigations are concluded and files are forwarded to the Office of the Attorney General, prosecutions of those cases can go on when prima facie cases have been established against some of those suspects. So it's something that can be done once investigations are concluded. If the police forwards investigation reports to the Office of the General, depending when a fair commission is set up or not, as it is now, there are powers and statutory provisions that most of these offenses can be taken care of in courts.
All right, Tamara, just want to Alebozi, who is the Assistant Director, Department of Public Prosecution of the Federal Ministry of Justice, would like to thank you for your submission and for the contributions that you have made. Thank you very much. Let's also appreciate from our Port Harcourt studio, a constitutional lawyer and public commentator, Chief Festus Oguche. Chief Festus Oguche, thank you very much, and I like your Niger Delta cap. Good to see you, and thank you very much. Let's also appreciate Aminu Abdul Rashid, also there. Aminu Rashid joined us from our Cardinal studio, and Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Leonard Silk Mazi Afam Osigwe, who joined us from our Birinkebe studio. Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you and wish you a good weekend. All right, let's quickly take a look at sports. And Super Eagles are ready to soar as the trade tackles with Guinea-Bissau. That's in the Africa Cup of Nations first qualifying fixture that's taken place today. Super Eagles winger Samuel Chukwueze